With the future of the economy up in the air recently, many have money on their minds. Some may already have financial advisors in place, but others may be looking for help. All month long, we've been highlighting efforts to support those within the LGBTQ+ community. Our Brandon Truitt spoke to a financial advisor at Northwestern Mutual about some of the challenges that people within the LGBTQ community can face when it comes to financial planning.
We're focusing, at least for this interview, some on challenges and things that LGBTQ couples or people face in terms of financial planning. I guess I want to start off by, what are some of those things right off the bat that maybe people don't think of are hurdles that some people face?
Some of the biggest challenges I think the LGBT community faces in financial planning is just finding the right fit for a partner to work with them on some of these topics. It's not even necessarily anymore that the way that we attack them is dramatically different since Obergefell was passed about 7 years ago. But now it's just having a relationship that you can trust and confide in to take care of you, because circumstances in our community just is a little bit more different. It can be a lot more intimate, a lot more emotional because of the way that a lot of these folks have grown up, right? So it's important to just find a relationship, just start right off the bat, that you can trust and confide in.
And you mentioned that Supreme Court ruling from 7 years ago. Can you talk about how that kind of changed some things and changed your line of work?
So when Obergefell was passed about 7 years ago, I think a misconception is that things just changed right overnight, whereas there were a lot of partnerships and unions that had to go back and be undone. So these couples could be legally married in the statute of the law to get some of the different benefits that same-sex couples have had, or heterosexual couples rather, should have had for their whole life. So what we've seen is, yes, things are changing, and that was a huge win for the LGBTQ community. But now there were some things that had to be undone so that these new advantages could be taken care of, from filing jointly for taxes, the unlimited marital deduction, survival benefits on Social Security were suddenly an element in a lot of that community's financial planning we could take advantage of. So what we saw is we actually had to go back and educate some of these clients who were in previous domestic partnerships, you name it, so that they could go reap the benefits that now they just had at their disposal.
Are there any hurdles that couples are facing that maybe people don't know about or wouldn't understand unless they're in it?
I think one of the hurdles that, unless you're walking in these shoes that the LGBT community does, one's certainly just the medical cost. Specifically in the transgender community, there's no shortage of different medical costs that go into planning for some of their lifetimes. So I think, again, going back to my original point of having an advisor that you can trust and confide in, and that just quite frankly has friends, family, people in their nuclear circle who they have had firsthand experience in the transgender world when it comes to the medical side, yeah, that's super important. The other thing that is also even more pressing is there are folks that we work with in planning in this community who they actually don't have relationships with direct parents, siblings, exterior relatives because of how they identify. So when it comes to thinking through financial planning and what's just different is things are a little bit more delicate, and it's important to be that much more compassionate with planning in that community because they maybe don't have the same financial support or even emotional support, whatever home is for them, when it comes to their finances and their planning. So they need a little bit more of just that compassion and thoughtfulness when it comes to talking about their finances.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, if we can go further on that, because you're talking about some people that are going through an immense emotional transition, a physical transition, and to be held up by dollars, I could imagine would be relatively impactful. And so does that change the way you approach some of these conversations?
The way that I really try to bring my best self to the conversation with these couples, these individuals who do struggle with their relationship with their family, is just by, quite frankly, shutting up and letting them have the complete floor, right? Making sure that it's clear that the conversation we have is confidential. And sometimes it's even by sharing some of the experiences that I've had with other clients, so they don't feel like they're the only one, right? Most people like to feel welcome, the sense of belonging. So sometimes it's just showing a little bit of vulnerability with, hey, you're actually not the only one. And it's just giving them a place that they can, at a minimum, come and feel safe talking about these topics. Now, I think this is an important part for me to be clear about. I have the two best parents that walk this earth. I really do. So sometimes when it comes to empathy, I really have to draw on other client experiences because it's not something that comes naturally to me. And I feel obligated to make sure that folks know I have the best folks in the world. But when it comes to working with clients in financial planning, as simple as asking, hey, are folks going to help out with your wedding fund? That's something you really just can't generically ask everyone, especially when it comes to this community.
Can you explain why a client might want someone who understands their background, what they're doing? What does that ultimately do for them?
A client would want someone to understand where they're coming from and just to welcome them into their house for some of these things. I know we're back in a virtual world a little bit now, but a lot of what clients want is trust. And there's a huge layer of that in financial planning. Absolutely. Financial planning is one of the most intimate conversations that you can really have with a professional. But when it comes to just where they spend their money, a lot of those folks tends to be a little bit more skittish and just careful than the normal consumer because they want to feel comfortable and they want to make sure that they're supporting someone who does have a value alignment with what's important to them as well.